Great.
Okay. There's a link, just in case somebody wants to write on it. Sticky notes.
This is different than,
I don't know who would want it.
Recording in progress.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, yeah. Just got it together, so yeah.
is this different than what's already on our packet?
No, it's in the link.
Visualization, and I asked for a timeline.
No, I know, but I'm asking if it's different than this.
No, just part.
Just bigger.
Yeah, just,
No, one was superseded.
no.
Jen is ready. I'm ready.
That's a very important part.
I just love how you took your glasses off. Hi, Mr. Lee. What? Oh, come on, did they really?
Yeah, it's a waste for me.
Let's just wait.
We'll schedule it.
We'll schedule it a morning meeting. I had a weird feeling when we heard, I'll announce it tonight.
Yeah, I just got the email.
Yeah.
Literally.
We talked yesterday, but she didn't get back to me today. But like I said, your stuff is so fluid with Karen. She's always trying to hit the mark. And I think she's on it. Like I can take that question.
All right, I think if recording has started, let's just get moving here. I know Jen will make it back in. So, all right, I will call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. With us tonight, we have Mr. Krasnoff, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Flynn, myself, Mr. Peterson, Superintendent Testani, Mrs. Guernsey, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Max Canali will be joining us shortly. And with that, if we rise to say the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
The republic for which
it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. This is our January 14th special budget session, discussing the budget in some detail. One thing that I did want to start off with, just because the members of the public, and I mentioned this to members of the board late last week. On Friday, we were invited down to Town Hall for a meeting with First Selectman Gerber, Mr. Testani, myself, and Mrs. Guernsey attended, kind of get ahead of what the First Selectman's view of the coming budget season is going to be. In the course of that meeting, it seemed clear that First Selectman was looking for some larger scope cuts in our budget. He floated some numbers. We kind of spitballed back and forth. Mr. Testani fortunately was able to come up with some broad stroke ideas that I think we'll be talking about more as we approach our vote on the 28th. But if you wanted to talk about that in any detail at this point.
Yeah, sure. So as Mr. Peterson mentioned, Mrs. Guernsey, correct anything if I miss anything. It was made clear that the budget as presented last Tuesday evening, as it stood, with a 6.45% increase, were clearly indicated that it would not probably be passed if the Board of Ed decided to approve it at such of an increase. And that there was some numbers thrown out in terms of reductions that would most likely be more acceptable from other town bodies. I did put together just, some proposed possible reductions in major categories that we can get more specific as we get through the process, if the board so chooses. Again, at this time, I think it's important that the board do their work, and wherever the board approves the budget, it moves on to the next phase of the process. But I think it was pretty clearly stated that there was not an appetite for a 6.45% increase that would go through the entire process without reductions being made at other levels.
And again, I'll just reinforce that obviously our procedure here, our process here is to give our budget to the town. In past years, we've done this back and forth where we presented a budget. Town hall has come to us looking for cuts. It's gone through various other town bodies, and we've made some adjustments later on in the process. I think Mr. Gerber's hope was that we could get ahead of that process a little bit and kind of take any possible rancor out of it. But ultimately, we've said at this table many times, many years, that our budget is also a statement of priorities. So whatever we decide to do on a majority basis is what the town will deal with. It goes without saying by definition, but. And as I get more information or I get any further context, I will certainly let everyone on the board know. But with that, oh, sorry, Mr. Racer.
Yeah, was there a general number thrown out by the administration that they thought would be acceptable? Where at 645, were they throwing numbers in the 4s, 5s? What was there any direction? You don't have to be specific, but
They were focused more on the absolute dollar increase year to year. They seem to want a year-to-year budget increase in the range of not more than $10 million, which I think they were talking about a $4.2 million range. We at the time
4.2 million
reduction in the year-over-year increase.
So, which would be approximately 4.5%. Told him I didn't think we could guarantee 4.5%. We would try to get under 5 if possible. I don't know if we want to do that. But I think any conversation again should be had here at the board table.
Completely agree.
thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just follow up. You had mentioned that you were thinking about major category reductions, so it would be helpful to me anyway, and for anyone else, if you're proposing, and this has been done in the past,
Yep.
where there's a list of all sorts of options that you might bring forward. So just as I'm going through all of this, and maybe other board members, what you're thinking, not necessarily that we would agree or not, but
Yeah.
just if we gonna have that for the 21st?
Yes.
Or, okay.
One thing just immediately we talked about is moving some of the project money that we had in there to capital. So that would free up some money, about $1 million that we talked about. We're just waiting for a response to make sure that we have that in writing. We're not going to make a reduction, obviously, to these projects and then that not come to fruition. If the town is willing to bond for those, that's something then as the projects get done, we move forward. But again, there's been nothing set forth. So as if we sit here right now, I think the board should proceed as we would have in any other case. I also just don't think that making reductions based on informal meetings is something that we necessarily should set a precedent for.
Thank you.
No, I agree. And I just, I want to stress that this is, a recent development, was on Friday. It was not the meeting that I expected it to be, but I wanted everyone to be fully informed about what was discussed at that meeting. Yes, Mr.
And I appreciate that. While some of that information is interesting, I appreciate the efforts and the efforts to have that collaborative meeting with the administration. It's something we've done for years now. I think that it's beneficial even when there's glaring numbers like this, to try and help give some understanding. So thank you for the three of you for doing that meeting.
Are we ready to plunge into the questions?
So, Mr.
Mr. Grasnoff?
Was there any further information or dialogue about things like snow plowing and maintenance that we've been picking up that I know in the past were not necessarily in our budget?
In a very broad sense, I think that longer term, town hall, they expressed interest in long-term finding some areas where we could collaborate where we are not now. But really, I don't want to throw anything out there right now because, those would kind of be longer term investigations requiring a lot of research. I signaled that I thought that the board would be open to that, as long as it doesn't take away from our core mission. But obviously we've been looking for years for some degree of collaboration. I will say, like, the point about snow plowing was brought up, and that was not really a meaningful kind of operational efficiency. It's just money one way or another. What the larger priority was trying to find actual efficiencies where we could get dollar amounts lower by eventually finding synergies between our operations.
I think we agreed that there would be nothing in this budget that could materialize, and that this would take a lot more conversation and longer discussion that may be for the future.
It was the beginning of what I think is going to be a long conversation.
I was gonna say, like, a decrease of that magnitude could have very drastic effects on certain things. So that's just my one concern here from you guys. Looking at how tight we kind of are to begin with contracts. I really hope the town understands that we are trying to be fiscal responsible.
Well, I think, Carol and I tried to make that point, I think. And Mike has said it repeatedly, that this is not a budget with a lot of new programming, a lot of new initiatives. And that most of it is driven by, as we always say, salaries and benefits. So I think there's an understanding that that's the case. Still, again, the number gave them pause.
Understood. Thank you.
Mrs. Kersey.
Them, is referring to Mr. Gerber. He was the only select.
I can't hear you over here, sorry.
Sorry. I was just referring to, Mr. Peterson said them, and at this meeting, the only elected official was Mr. Gerber that was there, so would be reflecting his.
No, that's fair. More people were in the meeting, but they were
Not elected.
first selectman staff. So how about if we move on to item 3A, review section enhancements, historical data. These are questions prefaced with the A in the sheet that we've gotten. And thank you to Ms. Boris for getting this to us early today. We'll have some time to go through it.
Thank you.
Give everyone a few minutes to go through the pages.
I'll start if.
Mrs. Jacobson.
A6, just a note to the board that I'm gonna follow up with that offline. So I will take care of that one separately. A11. Thank you for updating the accounts here. This is in regard to the internship and residency cost. So we had one answer and then it got updated. This is what I had. I just wanted to clarify that there's a note in the enhancements. It doesn't show the cost, but it shows the $120,000 in savings. And if you could, I don't know, I'm sorry, there's no names of who answered the question. So just provide a little bit more color on where that number is coming from.
So historically, we put a number to savings through attrition. What we did find is that with our resident program, the cost per resident is based on the agreement with Sacred Heart University in terms of the $15,300 that typical internship would cost, and then difference in the responsibilities and the training of the resident. Part of the agreement is to include a $10,000 living stipend. We get the savings because if we are happy with the resident, they are to be offered a position if one is available. If they turn down the position, then they are responsible then for a portion of that monies. If they do not take the position, then the savings would come from their starting salary from through the attrition, the extra salary. So our point this year is to make a concerted effort to make sure that any resident that is worthy of a position gets a position prior to going and seeking outside applications, where then they get passed over and we hire a more experienced teacher at a higher rate. We are making a concerted effort to make sure we realize the full savings through attrition.
Okay, so just two follow-ups on that. So we're going from an average of the 15,000 to then 25,000 for the residents.
That is the cost of a resident. And then they have a 3-year commitment with us once they are hired.
Okay,
But their experience is much more intense. It's similar to, as they mentioned, similar to a doctor. So they spend 1 year with a mentor teacher in that classroom, where by the second half of the year, they basically are taking over that classroom. And they attend their classes at the university, their graduate courses, but they also attend resident and mentor academies where they get specialized training. And they are concentrated in certain schools. That's the model. So that the residents are together and they all get to collaborate, and the mentor teachers work together. So it's a pretty intense program.
right. I'll save the rest of my questions for contracted comment. Anybody else want to?
Any questions for section A? Ms.
Oh,
Garcia?
yeah. I might have follow-up questions about Mrs. Jacobson's, because anyway, but I'll do that offline. Okay, so for A10, I had asked what the dollar amount would be. What is the cost for bringing this back? And I have, the answer doesn't include that, so that's still outstanding.
So
This is an adjustment just for
Yeah.
context, it's an adjustment that I plan and hope to make, so I need more details to do that.
right, so what we have planned is for a presentation on the 21st outside of the budget to look at the elementary schedule. As it currently stands, we run a 6-day cycle. We have examined it very closely, and we would prefer to run a traditional Monday through Friday schedule. With that, breaking all the possible thunder of the 21st, but increasing still work flushing out what the exact number would be on how we would offer more art, increasing the number of minutes, or possibly increasing minutes as well as frequency, and then what that would look like in terms of staffing. So if we went to just pre-COVID, we would have to increase FTE by 1. That would get us to the pre-COVID minutes. If we decided to increase frequency, that could increase possibly by 3 additional for a total of 4. But that would be offset by one of the proposed reductions that would go along with that for overall net savings to the budget of a little over $500,000.
Okay, well, I would welcome that conversation. It's something I know this board has been looking forward to, looking at that schedule and making improvements
Yep.
For our students. So thank you for that. feedback.
This is clarification. You said presentation. Are you going to prepare a presentation for us to see here?
Yes.
Or you thought- Okay,
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Mrs. Flynn.
Can I just ask a follow-up for that? So would that mean that each elementary school would then have their own designated art teacher at that point?
So we looked at that. Some would have it full designated. There still would be some
little-
points. Yeah, because other school, depending on the number of sections, if we went that route for frequency, it would increase some sections. So, but it's definitely something that we're very interested in. It is doable. There would be some trade-offs. There would be an overall savings to the budget, as I mentioned, but it would get us to a schedule that I think, number one, would be much more what is in line with what we're looking to do. And number two, I think it would also make scheduling at the elementary school much more efficient in terms of not having to sit in a room like we currently do now and divvying up itinerant staff. It's a lot, and it would just make more sense.
Thank you so much. A12, I had a question about technology, and the reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm feeling very critical of that based on the public input that we've had and thinking about, how can we look at this?
Sure. So
The response is a little bit like lacking in terms of cost savings and enough detail that I could dive into any aspect.
yeah, so we've talked as part of one of the proposed reductions that I was going to present to the board would be not necessarily needing to purchase Chromebooks this current year for elementary school. As you can see, we've gotten charging cards for third grade. The intention was, as was mentioned at a previous meeting, we were going to push that up to fourth and fifth. So these devices would not be going home every night anymore. So they would stay in the buildings and as needed. I think that would then also limit the wear and tear, and we'd be able to just use those when necessary in school or any type of testing or any type of projects. But there would be a reduction to the budget that would ensue because of that.
Thank you. And the interactive boards, are these replacing boards that are currently functioning?
Well, that's
or
the
is it-
thing, yeah. So again, that was another reduction that we could hold off on. And if we did have some end of the year spend out or following budget, we could look to then start to replace those aging boards. Something that's not needs to be critically done now.
And are the charging carts also on the list that you're keeping? Are you?
Charging carts are staying. The charging stations are staying in the current budget so that the fourth and fifth grade Chromebooks can stay in the buildings and not go home.
Fairly, we're finished?
I'm done with A, thank you.
Nice.
Just a follow-up to that, and I don't know if this document exists, and we're just forgetting it. Do we have like a technology capital waterfall? We have a waterfall for softballs and our sports, but like these huge capital investments, like I don't know when a smart board is replaced. I don't know when a Promethean board is replaced. Like, I don't know any of the lifetime of these kind of devices. Is there a way that we could maybe see something like that? I'm sorry, Marco.
Yeah, this has actually been started in regards to interactive boards as well.
Can you lead off by giving your name and your
Yes, my name is Marco Taddy, I'm the Director of Technology. So yes, this conversation has started about all different devices, both the Chromebooks, the staff devices, the infrastructure, as well as the interactive boards, as we mentioned. So all of them have different life cycles, and we've taken the time to inventory all the systems and give end of life projections. And we've started actually working with Courtney on building that waterfall over the next 5 years, kind of piecemealing the ones that are important to focus on, and then the next levels. So I'm not sure the formal way of actually presenting that waterfall and having that discussion, but we could definitely look to put something together.
Yeah, like I said, I think the intent is there, just these, we see these kind of documents for, I would say, smaller expenditures. And as we see more and more technology coming in and out, I think it might be a good idea to have some place that it kind of lives. So just as a thought to Carol's questions, I know there's a lot of tech questions throughout this document. It might be helpful to have those appended to
I can see that being beneficial because as we put together budget for it, you can see what was being put forward and why, and what the importance is on.
Yeah, telling the story always really helps. So the IT story is becoming more and more important, so.
Well, we started a couple of years ago, as you're all aware, that we don't buy Chromebooks just randomly
Yeah.
anymore. And we try to be intentional as kids enter middle school, then again in high school, and then those others circulate back down.
Yeah.
So we're trying to limit the investment every year.
And as we all know, some of these documents are not even necessarily for this board. They're for the public, they're for our other town bodies. We've seen that for our special education funding, our outplacement tuition, like giving, you know, our other town bodies some idea of what you guys are working with always seems to help in
We
advocating for
try.
this budget.
Sometimes people ask, you know, they find a Chromebook on a website and ask us why we can't get it for them.
But I think it's important to see what you guys are working with and seeing that document of what we really are spending, how long, what is the lifetime of a device, what is the lifetime of a program? It may be helpful, not for tomorrow, but for the next few months and definitely in coming budgets.
No, I mean, I think we look at, the athletic waterfall is very helpful for us
Yeah.
to see, and I think that's a useful planning document for the administration. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm sure there will be more.
Yes.
Stay there.
No, stay.
I will stay there.
Yeah. No.
Yes, Mrs.
Thank you. For A17, a question about the Go Guardian and Magic School. So I'm unclear on what was wrong with Gaggle and how is Go Guardian better?
It's a kind of a mixed conversation because the first piece of it was that throughout the district, there was a big push for wanting Go Guardian as a teaching component. And Go Guardian also offers what they call Beacon. So it's a dual encompassing system. So by actually removing Gaggle, it gives us some capital toward both Go Guardian teacher as well as Beacon. So we're actually putting both of those under one roof. That's
So what's fulfilling Gaggle's function?
Beacon.
Oh,
Yeah, so exactly. So there's two products that we would be getting specifically. The Go Guardian Beacon, which is the equivalent of Gaggle. It's actually a little bit better. But the main benefit is that we would have both that as well as, because we already have these devices onboarded with these products, the teaching component would be encompassed in that same.
what do they add to the teaching?
The Teaching Go Guardian platform is essentially allows teachers and administrators to control a device, monitor during class time, what websites they're going to, during an assessment, for
They
example.
can lock it down.
Yeah, which is actually the biggest push for us. So during an actual assessment, they can actually say, okay, I only want these 5 websites just for this 30-minute period. The kid's machine can only go to those 5 websites. They could jump around Google Docs, writing up their essay, whatever the particular information piece they're grabbing from New York Times or whatever it might be. And then the second they leave the classroom, it's open again to the next classroom. The next teacher might have different assignment.
And is that only if they're on the school issued Chromebooks?
Yes.
And are the students in the habit or the discipline of, because obviously a lot of them have different machines at home that they might have been bringing.
Yeah, so the BOID is an interesting conversation. We wouldn't be putting that platform on their BOID device. So it would, in the sense of the secondary school, it would be strictly for the Chromebooks.
Right.
So that's really more of an assessment side of things. But for every other level, it's obviously not a problem. So
We've had a lot of discussions over the last several months regarding Gaggle, just because there are certain things we've wanted them to do that they're unable to do. It got to a point, pretty stressful point where we're getting gaggles after hours and on weekends about things that I think is unfair to any one of our staff members to have to be responsible for. And that
Who's usually getting the alerts?
Rob, myself, principals, and these alerts could be at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're asleep, and
Yeah.
they're pretty serious. So, we wanted a different level of product that could be more catered to what we're asking them to do. I mean, if there's something that's that vital in the middle of the night, I think it's imperative that maybe a parent on a parent list gets contacted, not Rob Mancusi, who's sound asleep, or and the police department was also having some issues with how they were being notified. So, just asking around, a lot of folks have gone to Go Guardian, and it seems to be servicing them a little bit better than what Gaggle's been doing for us.
Okay. Thank you. Great description. Magic School.
yeah, so we've been working on
Helping people to write emails is not something I'm in favor of, and I know I'm vastly oversimplifying what it can do, but I would need to be sold on this.
100%. Yeah, so we actually have been running an AI trial, going through conversations in the secondary schools with some teachers. using a few different tools, Magic School being one of them. And using it for actually building instruction, working on assignments with students, coming up with different ideas, even using it to prove things that are happening to see how AI might be used in a better way to use it. Magic School is kind of the leading system for that, and it's been a really great tool for us. The teachers really enjoy using it. The students enjoy interacting with the teachers during class time and playing around with it. And so from a district side, the main benefit of using a piece of software that we control is that we actually have the ability to push it out to the right places, ensure that it adheres to privacy policies, because Magic School has been pushing the narrative that the free version does not adhere to these privacy policies because they need to get their money somewhere. So it's selling the data. So that was one of the big pushes. And we know that our staff are going to use software that works. So we would rather get the software and deliver it to them, as well as train them on how to use it. You know, there's a lot of other teaching components to this. There's assignments that they can actually give students that they can control the narrative of how they're using AI for the assignment. So I think a few teachers would probably say it better than I.
Magic School does have a component that you could run your lesson plan through, and it would rate it how AI proof your lesson plan is and your assignment.
That I want to see.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. When I went to the 3-day workshop with Matt Mervis, he showed, we all had to present sample lesson plans from our district, and he could run it through Magic School and it would rate it from 1 to 5 on whether it was AI proof or not.
And how did we do?
The ones we submitted were pretty good, but you would think that, you know, you read the lesson plan, you think, okay, this is a good lesson plan, and then you run it through and it scores a 2. So it wasn't as AI proof as you may have thought, and it'll give you some suggestions on how you can do better in order so students can produce work to suffice your requirements. It was pretty cool.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Piggyback on Ms. Max Canelli, Magic School will only be put on the Chromebooks or?
It's actually a software as a service platform, so it wouldn't be pushed out as an application. It'd be something that we'd be giving accounts to staff to be able to log in to use. So it's not
Student.
there are extensions that it has on Chrome, but it's not an application we're pushing at the device.
So this compare that to Copilot or some other things that are out there?
So it's more comparable to ChatGPT in the sense that it's a interface that you're using on a website. The difference is that it's already built out fillable prompts that you're going through. You're not just open-ended typing, asking you for things. It actually has different platforms and systems that the both Magic Schools built, but also as a district we can add that will actually walk a teacher or a staff through the usage of the application. So maybe it's something like, please enter the character you want to talk about. You might say something about Charlotte's Web. It will then say, walk through an example of how you want to talk about this book, or how to build an assignment for this book. Or even if math is a little tricky, but even math, it can actually give you some information as to how to better teach a particular subject. And you can actually ask them some questions. What if my student is new to algebra? Give me some ideas, and it'll actually walk through different paths. So it's using on the back end, it's actually using ChatGPT's engine to actually figure out the answers. It's just making sure that the information is private, that the information is secure, and that it's actually using district level, initiatives, things like bad words and someone trying to jump around the prompt. Imagine you push a student into working on a particular lesson for a history assignment. They go, I don't want to talk about that. Tell me the scores on the NFL, last night. It will immediately say, sorry, but let me tell you all about, Abe Lincoln here. And then it will switch the prompt back. So it has a lot of, district level focused things that a lot of schools have helped this, and it's going to keep getting better.
We couldn't do that with ChatGPT.
Well, theoretically we could, but the problem is we would have very little ability to limit the use. So it kind of just becomes, to your point about Copilot, it becomes open-ended. It's a great tool. It likely could do similar outcomes, but not only would the staff and teachers and users have to understand how to build proper prompts, they would also have the ability to lean away from what the end goal of using the tool was. So they don't have a very derived method of using it, as opposed to here, we have, we're ensuring that they're using it for the proper reasons. And you mentioned about writing an email is a good example. There's great reasons to write an email and have it maybe look through it to make sure you're not, yelling at a parent. However, that might not be the best use case of a tool that we're giving out to teachers to use in the classroom. So there's limits to what it can and can't do.
So are we responsible for any additional costs after we push this out when they upgrade the software like they do with ChatGPT? Is it just that flat rate and that's what we're going with, or is there a licensing fee or?
This fee is for the grades 6 up, the staff, and it is a flat for the year. I can't say for certain that the next year will not go up or down depending on the API cost or ChatGPT. However, historically, ChatGPT's OpenAI API costs have gone down whenever a new model comes out. So I would see it becoming more competitive, especially as more tools are coming out, especially as Copilot and Gemini are getting more popular and cheaper. The other tools like this are going to maintain, I think, their competitiveness. So I don't foresee it being much more the year after, and there's definitely no usage fees. This is just a flat usage of the platform. We have, unlimited use of it within the constraints of the platform.
I just have one quick
Yes,
follow-up.
please.
I just want to toss out there, not a question, just a comment of anything that interferes with the development of student creativity. Just obviously, I'm sure the board would agree, and I'm sure you would agree, but just please know that I'm always going to want to hear how this in no way achieves that.
Sure.
And I say that because I was at a conference where teachers thought this was the greatest thing, AI was the greatest thing ever. And it was horrifying to hear my peers speak in that matter of all the things AI could do. And you're taking the thinking away. And yeah, it does cool stuff. It might, as you say here, improve student engagement. Yeah, bells and whistles will improve student engagement, but it just had to say it. Thank
Early
you.
days for AI.
It's moving fast.
Any more questions within the A block of questions?
Just to be clear, Mr. Peterson, because obviously, it's a lot of reading and I didn't do it until getting here because I was at work. We will have the column still of follow-up questions to this as part of the spreadsheet.
That's in the sheet already, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mrs. Flynn.
This is on A22. Just following up to a little bit about some questions on Power School. I did see some news articles last week about some breaches within Power School. I asked Mr. Testani, maybe you can just speak to like what our neighbors were saying. Obviously, it's something that came up. I think it's always good to address for the public and as we're moving towards a different platform.
Yeah, I had a conversation actually today with some districts, and none of them were affected per se. They were given some communication. We are going to use this as a tool to possibly negotiate further the costs. But we're also going to have some follow-up questions. Marco's already reached out in the process of scheduling.
And the run of Infinite Campus for that 1 year, can you just speak to why that's necessary, what that does, just so the public and the
Yeah,
board is
so
aware?
best case scenario on any dual SIS and a rollout would be 6 months to 9 months. We have a pretty large system. It just happens that we're going to go with the year, the rounding of how the licensing works. So to that point, could we push it out further? Possibly, but it does give us a lot of ability to really properly set up Power School as opposed to just getting it online and rolling it out. So there is a 1 year rollout for that, and that will start the July 1, 2025 is the initial start of the process of building Power School, training staff, coming obviously the September months. And getting everyone ready for the following school.
Thank you.
Mr. Krasnoff.
Follow up to that, is there any way to defer any costs in our subsequent years, or is it all the initial setup and?
It's kind of a mix because the first year they do have a lot of training that they require for new customers. So that is a big piece of that. And in some ways we've split up some of those payments already in a waterfall schedule for how much it's going to cost. And that was broken out in the budget. So the first year's costs are broken out and we got some of it deducted because of being new customers. But it's, yeah, deferring it further out, especially because they were just bought out by another company, was a little tricky. But as we mentioned, because of this breach that happened recently, I've been following up with the sales individuals, as well as talking to other school districts about what exactly it means. And, you know, not to say that it's not an egregious breach, because it is, but, you know, like any tech company, it does open the opportunity for them to make a huge security improvement. And I do intend to ensure that they actually adhere to that change. But it also does give us, you know, a leverage because it's a big switch for us. So if we're going to make the switch, you know, we need to have some assurance from that.
Thank you.
Follow-up?
Mrs. Jacobson.
Just on Power School as well, the number in our book, the 245,996 for the first year cost, year one costs, does that include the $38,000 change that's in? Okay, I see Courtney nodding her head. Yes, that includes the training. Okay. I'll echo my concerns, and I hear you talking about the money. For me, it's not really about money. I'd spend 5 times this amount if it guaranteed that we could lock down any cybersecurity incident, because that's incredibly costly to districts and to the humans that it impacts. Have you personally seen the communication, not to the districts or impacted, but to the actual individuals, the teachers and the students or the families?
I have not.
Can we ask for a sample for that communication?
I'm on actually a listserv that's talking about asking for that, so they may actually share it at some.
I'd like to see their communications out. Thank you.
Just one last follow-up on the A questions, which was A19. And so I just want to make clear that I'm reading A19. I'm surprised. Page 2, under operational efficiencies, expanding in-district special education programming, I assumed that that meant for the 25-26 budget. So this is a reflection on the current. This is not another expansion.
No,
And I'm not criticizing another expansion, but that I had read that as we're,
no, it was an example of what we've done in the past.
okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Kind of reiterate that.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from A? Enhancements, historical data. All right, I think we're ready to move on to review section B, executive summary. These are questions B spreadsheet. I try to give everybody a few minutes, but not seeing any hands. Anyone? We can always come back if questions crop back up. We'll move on to item 3C, the review section of instructional services. These are questions E in the spreadsheet. For pages 51, 55. In the budget. Mrs. Jacobson.
I'll jump to 3. I had a question in here, everyone, because, and also for newer members, we have discussed in the past the bringing some of the services in-house that are currently contracted out. So I'm seeing just the trajectory of this line item, and I went back like a decade ago to what's proposed here. Did some analysis on this, but, I appreciate the answer, but I'm looking as to why, right? So we had looked, at this a couple years ago. It was determined at that time continue to contract for OT and PTs. And my question is about right now. And why looking at what's the benefit to contracting this out versus bringing in staff?
For that particular contract, I mean, for OTPT particularly, we two times, under Dr. Jones and Mr. Cummings, we looked before we went out to bid for the OT contract, which currently is with Constellation now, used to be with Rehab Associates. We did look at the possibility of hiring our own occupational therapists and physical therapists. We made contact with all our area colleagues in Fairfield County, and the cost benefit was really negligible. So at that time, we determined as a team to go out to bid, and we did get a favorable cost from Constellation. We currently are looking though for, at our contracted services, particularly at our CLCs and our contracted speech, because that continues to be a shortage. And we are currently out to bid to see if we can maintain the quality of services that we have at a more, cost-effective rate, because special ed services continue to rise, and we appreciate the efforts to try to contain costs when possible.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like the athletic trainers. We contracted them out, but there was actually an educational benefit to bringing them in-house, right? Like staying always around, always available, get to know the students better. I didn't know if there was any benefit besides the fiscal piece of it to thinking about that. Similar to as we're doing with other staff.
I think part of, and Robbie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think after talking to some folks around about this, I think the market in the private sector for the athletic trainers compared to bringing them in-house, I think we had a better chance at getting them in, as we saw, because they were being underpaid in the private sector. And
The reverse in this case?
it's the reverse in this case, and I think the other problem we would have then is it would become another shortage area we'd have to contend with, and then not providing those types of services would be catastrophic to the kids.
I just wanted to understand.
And OTPT is not an area where we have a ton of turnover, even in our contract.
Thank you.
We got lucky with the trainers that the private sector wasn't paying.
Thank you.
Mr. Krasnoff.
It's not in the book, but, after we talked about the hockey and how expensive rentals are. Chair to Mr. Toscani, and there was a shortage of JV players. Did we see a recovery of the JV team? Or is it still?
Well, there's been a shift in coaching there that I think it's gonna take a year or two to get kids to come, give them an opportunity. We have made some adjustments. We do have some JV going to one location at Sacred Heart, so to speak, just the varsity being over at Sacred Heart. So we are realizing some savings there, teams there. So Wonderland is getting part of it, Sacred Heart the other, to offset some costs.
So I'm all for sports. I was an athlete myself. But sometimes when there's not enough students for the spend.
Hockey's an expensive sport. We have a couple of others that we spend a lot of money for that, huge participation. think it's something we could keep our eye on as we move forward, that the program doesn't start to develop. We have to maybe make some different decisions.
I appreciate that.
Fine.
Just through the chair to Mr. Chistani, and I just noticed this as well. Could we get a breakdown for the split between Shoe and Wonderland right now? I think we had it last year.
Yeah.
It might be helpful just to see, where we're kind of biting the bullet.
Get that tomorrow and send it out.
Yeah, and I'll put it on the sheet too. It's not, no rush.
It's Max and Kelly.
Question one, no, that's page, E14. I didn't write the question really well. I was wondering, in terms of anecdotal, what's the difference between NWEA and Acadians? And then separately, for assessments, non-PSAT, SAT in the high school, what would be saved by reducing them?
Right, so we only give NWEA in ninth grade. So by taking that away, it would save $7,000. In terms of the difference between the two assessments, James is happy to provide that. I mean, we've had conversations as recently as last week with the high school administration that if NWEA is not something you want to do, then we have to have clear, identical assessments that we develop in-house that are being given to all those students in replacement. We have to have something.
Why not the PSAT?
Not given 3 times a year. It's only given once, so we can't screen with that.
Okay.
So I saw
Is
you,
it only ninth grade for NWEA?
question was related to high school. So yeah, we give it in elementary and middle as well, but the number was only for
It's
the
ninth grade for eighth grade for high school.
How long is the test?
on average, about 40 to 55 minutes when we pull the data.
And for students that we've had, obviously there can be transfers, but for students we've had since possibly pre-K, if not kindergarten, what is the value
NWEA.
in ninth grade? Like, what are we discovering that we don't already know?
Yeah, so we don't have longitudinal data on that, but we do have to screen students per the SRBI guidelines 3 times a year. We do, that's up to us, except for K3, which is regulated by statute, of course. It's Mr. Testani's point, we can do that in-house, or, we could do that through some sort of standardized mechanism, which is what we've currently been doing.
But we're required to do it 3 times a year in ninth grade?
We're required to screen all students 3 times a year. Some people do it through curriculum-based measures, which is what Mr. Destani is referring to, common assessments and so forth in-house.
Or some don't do it at all?
Well,
Just curious.
they're just SRBI.
I have never heard of this before. That's why I'm asking. So,
Are you saying it's statutory?
I'm saying no, it's a Department of Connecticut guideline through the Department of Education, SRBI guidelines.
This is not a
Statutory,
requirement.
A guideline from the Department of Ed, I would say is a requirement.
May I follow up, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly? I want to get some more color on the second part of Mrs. Maxon's Kennelly's question, the NWA versus Acadians. Now, I know Acadians is on the approved list. Okay? We are double dipping on students taking both of these. No, you're not. NWA, DA is for third grade up.
So high school takes only NWA. Let's go to elementary. That's the statute. K-3 has to have an approved dyslexia screener. They take Acadians, K-3. There's a number of discrete measures in there like oral reading fluency and so forth. K-3 does not take NWA reading or language usage. They only take Acadians. They do take NWA math.
Okay.
Screen for that. So they're not, there's no redundancy there. 4 through 8, they take NWA reading and math, no Acadians.
Questions in the E section? Probably no. We could come back if Two?
I'll have it.
Oh, please, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm just gonna follow up on F1.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, you're in. Right, sorry.
You're the one who reminded me of that.
I'm sorry. It just fell right there under E18, so I apologize. I apologize.
Let's use that to move on to section H. So these are questions H, this is the review section, tuition. Pages 67 to 69, budget focus, questions are marked. Questions H in the spreadsheet. Mrs. Flynn.
This isn't specific to any of the questions, but one of the documents that was provided to us, the outplacement summary sheet, it may be helpful at some, it is helpful if we get some longitudinal some years back. I think as we're talking about the increase in outplacement tuition, it might be helpful to see that. I don't know if we can. I went back a little bit, Rob, but it was kind of hard.
Just so I'm clear on what you're asking.
So this exact same thing, maybe just going back a few years. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Do we keep that information?
I think we can probably dig it up.
I tried to dig some through old budget presentations, but they were in different format. I can help, I think I can help a little bit.
I can figure it.
I will say to Mrs. Flynn's point, and I think we bring this up almost every year.
Yeah.
We get tasked by the town for defending trends.
Yeah.
And it's useful to have some data to be able to back up our understanding of those trends.
I think they need to understand we have no control over what they
Correct.
charge, and those are the current rates, and they're only going up. And it is a conversation I know that's being had at the state level. People are advocating to put some controls and guardrails in place for this, but
Anytime we're advocating, a picture document seems to be helpful in that, so I always will advocate for one.
Are you looking for tuition
cost.
cost at each placement from
Yes.
year to year?
Yes. So can I follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
I think we're looking for like a trend line.
Mhm.
So speaking to the challenges budgetarily, there are two issues budgetarily with this item. One is we never know how much excess cost reimbursement we're gonna get while we're doing the budget, and it's been reducing. Meanwhile, the tuition trend lines are increasing, right? Even though we have less students, which is a great add, I would think, to the presentation, and as we go through this with the town boards, that trend lines on our students, because I hope, because of the programming we built, is going down. However, costs are going up for factors outside of our control, right?
Talk about incidence rates.
Right, and as we advocate, and I think the whole state's gonna be advocating around excess costs as they always have, but with greater fervor, being able to provide actual real-time data to them to say over 10 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, the rates have increased 4%, 5%, 6% on an annual compound, whatever it may be, will be
In the
helpful, will be
document.
useful.
Some of you might remember, if it's a 10-year trend, we can update that and we can add what our tuition costs were over that period, the increase, we can work on that and what the excess cost reimbursement for those years.
And then like the number of students we have that like going up, and then recently we've been starting to go down. So
Well, but the number of students that are becoming special ed eligible.
Yes.
yes.
But for this subset, this population and this trend line, I just think it may be helpful. Thank you.
Max, anything like?
Quick follow-up to that, and I was not able to, but as an aside to either the chair or Mrs. Jacobson, was anybody able to go to that town hall last Thursday? And did this topic come up?
Anyone want to address it? Mr. Grassley?
I actually want to go to the CES legislative session. This was the number one topic discussed. Almost every single district brought this up.
The out of placement tuition?
Placement tuitions and no cap. I can tell you, for the public to know, we are one of the districts probably in the best shape compared to some things I've heard. There's some districts that have one student that costs as much as almost our budget. So we've been very fortunate to bring a lot of it in-house, but it's a lot of people.
They got an earful.
A lot of people are getting very, very, very low.
Mr. Jacobson?
Not on that night because we were respectful of the residents who had a lot of concerns on other issues and they already know about these things, but we're definitely gonna, are reiterating with them along the way. But I did also raise it with the commissioner and the State Board of Education at our conference directly. Two separate topics, getting the information earlier on rates, which there is already a proposal from the state board, not a legislator, to get it by December 31st, which is a lot better than July 1st. It'd be earlier for us, but at least it will help. That is already approved. The other issue is the rate setting. So getting the information is one part, the rate setting is another, i.e. cap, i.e. range, i.e. something, right? Because right now there is none. So you can't just say, oh, we're gonna help out the districts with getting them the information earlier. That's only part one. Part two is the rate setting piece. So I did speak about it with them and I have a feeling it'll come up. So I will keep everyone abreast. So we've got two pieces, so.
Thank you.
I wouldn't bet on any excess cost going up. Pool of money is not.
Well, I get that, but the point of, and you've raised this as well, that idea of they can do whatever they want with
Correct.
tuition. They can do something about that.
Yes.
So, thank you.
I will add, I've had some conversations with members of our state delegation on this very topic, so I know it's on their minds.
Fantastic.
And if I could just add one piece, if you don't mind, because I think it is important, is that we are fortunate in that we've forecasted appropriately, but we're not fortunate in the costs to the district, which are really monumental. And the fact that it's not just the reimbursement rate that's going down, but our eligible expenses are also, capped because as our per pupil cost increases, our eligible expenses go down.
Yeah.
So that's hitting us in multiple places. So it is a very, very big challenge to the budget. One that we have luckily with the board's support anticipated over time. And now that it's going from an anticipated 70% as high as we were the last 3 years to 60% this year. It's a really, really big challenge with the budget. So,
Next, Kelly.
I don't know what you mean by eligible expenses.
when you have, what you're reimbursed is 4.5 times the
Right.
average.
So what can factor into that? They're changing?
They're
Or
not
is there some,
changing.
what are we doing?
Well, as the costs of special education rise, it rises more significantly for a small number of students. It rises averagely for the rest of the students. So there's less kids that are the very, very, very expensive kids, because when you multiply the average cost per student into the 4.5%, you're only reimbursed over that threshold.
Our threshold is, it's, for the first time, it's over $100,000 before we're even eligible for any reimbursement.
Thank you.
To be clear, although we're fortunate in that we did anticipate some of these, we're really unfortunate also in that when the state tiered the reimbursement rates, Fairfield is what's considered tier 1 for the lowest of the percentage reimbursement rate as well, with the others that are in our angelic range. So I just wanted to clarify that piece.
I'm gonna continue on H2. There's a note in your answer. This needs to be adjusted on page 68. Can you help me understand what it is that you would be editing for the POE budget book?
Sure. Yeah, so the reimbursement rate that we budgeted 62%. So that was a copy from last year, 68%. So I need to update that.
So the second sentence, the proposed budget for 25-26 contains the legislated 68% reimbursement rate. Is that what you're gonna be changing?
Yes.
You're gonna change that number to 62?
Although we're hearing now it's as low as 60, but at the time of publication, what we budgeted.
So is there risk? There's risk in this number. Thank you.
We budgeted at 60.
Budget at 62, we're gonna be actually at 59.
So when we get to revenue on the not tonight, the number that is in the revenue is not 68, it's based on 62.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That number's going down slightly.
Thank you.
More questions H and tuition.
I'm gonna follow up, Mr. Peterson.
Please.
Page 5, here's my risk question. Knowing that we have not received the rates, you have to do your best to come up with some sort of an estimate on what those rates might be for 25, 26. What you've put in here is 4.37%. And my question was, where did you come up with that number? And you're basing it on two factors. Getting less reimbursement than what we get now, and increased outplacement solutions, which is what we just discussed. But if the trend line for us is not to the positive, as Mr. Testani is saying, it's probably impossible to estimate how much risk is inherent in that, because there's been a range before, right? Like a range, okay.
That's right. So we're assuming a certain reimbursable cost number, and then we assume a certain percentage reimbursement rate on that. So there's the two factors. So number one is the reimbursable costs, which takes this year's reimbursable costs and just grows it by 4%, the budget. And then the second risk is applying the percentage reimbursement rate. With right now, our budget assumes 62%, but we're hearing it's gonna be likely as low as 59%. And so there is a dollar amount that we can.
Unless there's a dramatic proposal that happens this session.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, thank you.
I don't know.
Going.
Please.
Page 6. We got these handouts. I just want to nod to us, the town, the teachers, whatever it may be. We worked really hard for a really long number of years and have to try to explain to so many town boards for a very long time why we were making investments in our in-house programming. I want to nod to this trend line in that unfortunately the fiscal is not matching. But in terms of our programming, serving kids in district with their peers, thank you for that. My follow-up on this question for H6, Mr. Testani, is in your presentation. And also, I don't necessarily think that this needs to go in the budget book, but it might be nice to add it. I just think that this would be a really great addition.
Absolutely.
If we, like, in terms of explaining things.
We're gonna add that and talk to Rachel tomorrow, make it look really nice, but I think it's something we need to highlight as much
Yes,
as.
with the new chart with the graphics, those two pieces together, I hope will provide a visualization that makes this a little simpler for people in the public or just other town boards to consume. We get it, but it's complex. And thank you for putting that together.
And I think as we've talked about, as the prevalence rate increases and these numbers decrease, it really just shows the commitment that we have to providing good in-house services here in Fairfield Public Schools. So just as we highlight music, art, and athletics, we should be highlighting the work done by Rob and the entire department, and all those boots on the ground.
Thank you.
And we do know that this is a major area where we need to do education of our own for other town bodies. Every year, we seem to, we could maybe do a little bit better each year, and graphics help.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the critical areas where, as we invest in our teaching staff, that having less turnover, especially in the shortage areas like special education, school psych, social workers, I think this is where the payoff begins because we get consistency of services.
Are there any more questions in this section? Tuition.
Just one very quick comment. I think there are a few questions that are as predictable as the ones that produce these charts. And just a suggestion to make it a part of future budget books. We ask every year. And again, obviously we always get the information and it's very helpful, but we always ask.
I think we've been doing better about that in
I
recent
agree.
years, but like you can always do more.
It will be noted for next year's budget.
Gotta make
Board of Ed,
suggestions.
or in the Board of Ed budget, you could throw it in.
Yeah. That's.
All right, well, let's move on to item 3 on the agenda, review section, other pertinent services. These are pages 70 to 78 in the budget book, and these are questions starting with I. It's I in the spreadsheet.
Jacobs.
Oh, please, Jacobs.
I1. There was item number 6, $77,000. That wasn't budgeted in that line area. So I was asking for clarification, and it says that funds were repurposed from elementary text materials to support the K-5 literacy work. So we've had lots of conversation about the ELA, lots of presentations on the budget, a lot of money put towards it. So why was $77,000 needed for more?
What did we repurpose it for? So, building currently has a literacy booth that needs, and that comes at a cost to the district. That's what the purpose is for. Out of school hours, after school. Get paid for that time.
We pay the hourly rate for them to meet after school. I believe strongly that was gonna be the only way that we would get effective participation than if we asked for volunteers.
Wait, Can you explain that a little bit better? I'm sorry.
So each school has a literacy leadership team. They meet after school hours regularly. Part of our literacy plan that we submitted to the state. It involves teachers and other staff members, also involves parents. So, because it is after contractual hours, there is an hourly monetary rate that we should pay teachers. We could have went the volunteer route, but we really were concerned about the participation that would garner.
That wasn't budgeted for.
No. So we purposed that and then we used grant money, so putting it in this year's budget so that we can continue that forward. So for 1 year, we were able to take it from one area and then repurpose grant money to backfill that.
The quote unquote right to read grant, that we got the 2-year, that money?
Yes.
Is that the grant you're talking about? Is that the purpose?
That's fine.
Yes. Through you. So the materials, were those just unneeded? Are those just not physical? I think there has been a lot of concern with how much of this is being delivered through physical text and how much of this work is being delivered on a Chromebook or on a smartboard. Did this in any way impact that? Did we just not want to buy additional? Can you kind of give some light to that?
Text for purchase.
So it says that
From the
you-
grant money.
No, you repurposed from elementary text material.
Yeah, and then we used the grant money to buy the materials because it would be a
Oh.
one-time purchase.
So we still have those materials. We
Yes.
still got those materials.
Yes.
Thank you.
Didn't want to build a cliff because it was one time, so.
Thank you. That makes more sense.
Anyone else? I'll say before you go, I really appreciate the copier breakdown. This is the first year that I have very limited questions on this. We previewed this, talked about this. You always bring it up in finance committee, which I appreciate. This is kind of my pet thing.
Find savings. So.
No, I think this is an evolution, and I appreciate all the backup.
Our staff member, Heather Robbins, partnered with Mark on this, so thank you for saying that.
No objection. We'll move on to item 3F on the agenda. Review section supplies, text materials, pages 79 to 93 in the budget book. Questions with Jay. Mr. Krasnoff.
Thank you. I have a multi-tiered question. It's J15. My question was about spreading out the world language expense over multiple years. In terms of that, how would that look? What could we spread out? And not only in terms of world language, are there other things we could possibly spread out over multiple years? Just to be a little bit more cost efficient, considering a lot of these programs are multiple year programs. I would love to see the expense maybe spread out a bit if possible.
Yeah, so I don't have the data with tonight. We're in talks with the companies that we, or I should say the publishers that we're gonna go with. As you may remember, the Spanish and French texts were an 8-year license, so that could be spread out, as were many of the others. Our world language coordinators also looking at the digital access versus the paper and what that would look at. So I don't have specific numbers for you this evening, but we are looking at what that might look like in the future.
I appreciate that. And now, is there any other things that we could possibly look at to spread out? Are there other things, maybe even like ELA or anything that we have tech fees or textbook fees that are gonna accumulate? Instead of spending it all up front, maybe we can take it off on the blow and do it in a multi-year fashion.
Yeah, so the other textbook fees on here that you've seen are social studies and science. Those I listed as gap year, meaning that they were approved during the last curriculum review and the license subscription has run out. So those are 1-year costs, which wouldn't be able to be spread out. We could say we're no longer funding the digital text and not have that, but it's not something we could spread out for 1-year licenses. Everything else in the instructional lines are 1 year, are not looking forward to future years for 1-year costs.
And to that point, just moving forward, it might be something that makes sense for us to, obviously, there may be a cost in spreading it out, whether it's, some kind of interest we gotta pay, but it may make sense in years like this year when we're being asked to save some money. If we could save 300,000-400,000, that would be quite a big way to numbers that we're trying to get.
A quick follow-up to that. I thought during the presentation, correct me if I'm wrong, they said that digital was more expensive. Like, I remember that there was surprise that the plan we went, it was not intuitive, that by getting hard copy, I think, and digital, that was more affordable than only digital.
I'll have to go back and look at the numbers. Usually the hard copy with the digital is more expensive than just the digital. But over time,
Something was different about this because it was really eye-opening.
over time, you always pay more. So at the end of the 6 years, for example, then you have to pay for years between years 7, 8, 9, and 10 with that. So if you were to project costs out, how much the actual program will cost as a bottom line number, it probably is more expensive on the digital side. Because once you buy the book, you buy the book.
Right.
Ms. Jacobson.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, the book can last 15 years, but you have to buy 3 licenses in that period,
Sometimes more.
sometimes more.
Depending on their tiered system. So like
Why don't we
Wayside,
just buy the hard books?
that is enough.
Yeah. And
The savings?
we're looking at what Ally's looking.
Maybe not upfront, but long-term and then spread out.
Ally's looking into all those options. We're just waiting for the publisher to respond so we can look at every option available.
One more follow-up to my own question. Due to the way it may be rolled out, is there a possibility to do it by grades? Because I don't know how you plan to do it exactly, but you may not want to roll out a new program to, let's say, juniors in high school that are in their 5th Spanish class. They want to roll it out either year 1 or year 2. So could we roll it out slower to maybe absorb some of the costs? Or is that going to be detrimental to the overall?
I would say it would need a further discussion perhaps with the curriculum group here. The way we've done curriculum is a 10-year cycle with vertical alignment. I'm not opposed to looking at something different where we perhaps present it all and implement in different years, but with the approval process as it stands now, once it gets approved, we implement. So I would just say we might need a further discussion on it.
Can I follow up? And this happens with state standards too, and state assessment. So the issue with that is that the grade 2, Mr. Krasnoff's point, the grade 12 don't have vertical alignment.
Mr. Krasnoff's.
Yeah, so like example, the point is that you're plopping it on top of existing students. So for when you're talking about vertical alignment, that's vertical alignment starts in K,
Full agreement.
right? You know what I'm saying? So it's a logical question in terms of rollout, yeah.
Without a doubt, we did it with math, we did the AGI sequence, you guys approved, the board approved, all at once with the understanding that it wouldn't be implemented until years after. So it is a possibility, it's just not the way we have done business in the past.
To your point, it would be vertical alignment starting in grade 6 in reality.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, because we don't have K3, sorry.
Well, even what we do in the other, we start all over in grade 6, so.
I see, I understand.
Mr. Maxley Kelly.
Couple of questions where I'm not understanding the explanation of the numbers. So the easy one I think will probably be J13. Because page 80 very distinctly says an $80,000 increase for author visits. You confirmed I was correct that it's 55,000. So why does this reference 80,000?
It's 5,000 per school.
So
So
we're funding it more than, beyond the 11.
all schools.
Oh, okay.
Schools, yes.
Gotcha.
So there is no real change from the presentation is what I was trying to say. It is 80 is the right number.
Okay. I thought if somehow it was, we were only doing it for elementary schools.
They're in each grade level. The high school did talk about speakers versus book talks perhaps, depending on the year, but essentially the 5,000.
Will be all schools parts. Sorry about that.
What's the, that's 16 schools, that's not 17.
16, yes.
What school is not getting author visits?
Every school.
Fitzgerald?
Probably
16 times 5 is the 80.
Probably Walter Fitzgerald.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Sorry.
And then for J12, what did I, and I'm happy to say that it's me. I'm not clear on what I was not understanding with the 124,000, 119,000. I see that somebody else asked about the, Ms. Jacobson with J2 also asked about the 59, but then what are the page 178 and page 88 different numbers? Okay.
All right, so for the J2, the social studies.
No, J2 I understand.
Okay.
So it also was asking, pursuing the same line of thought as my J12. I understand the 59,000, but then on page 178, it's 124,000. And with the same explanation of Fairfield Museum and the gap year. So I don't understand that.
So the charts on 177 and 178 don't naturally fit the line items, specifically because there's a text and materials account and a PD curriculum account for each department. And so this is a handmade chart on 177 and 178. So I then go through the two accounts and I parse out what belongs in PD, what's in curriculum development, and what's in text and materials. So it's not always a one-to-one comparison because I shift things around depending on what it is. There is 124 in text and materials. That includes a number of things, the vast majority of that being online text renewals for the final year of the social studies curriculum.
But then what is the reference in J2 to 59,000?
So that would be page 80. Let's go there.
So at page 8 of the 401 first paragraph, the very end of it alludes to the 59,000 for social studies materials, which I understand, but then page 178 is social studies materials and text at over double the cost.
Yeah, it's more than 59. That number is not accurate. We will fix it.
Year-over-year change, not the total cost, and the other sheet is the total cost. We could do a crosswalk of that.
I don't understand what you just said.
This is explaining the increases to the budget, so that's an increase. Not a total cost.
Oh, I see. So that number that added there was from
Which number that was added where?
880, 59,000
Yeah,
would be the increase from last year to this year, but not the total cost this year. That's how you figured it out.
Yes.
so then what are we spending 124,000 on? Because you're saying that this 59,000,
The net increase to the,
so just the social studies, one gap year and the Fairfield History Museum field trip costs 124,000.
I could give you a detail on each book we're buying,
No.
if you wanted to see it, but.
No, I just, because your answer to Mrs. Jacobson said 59,000 was for the texts and the field trip. And I'm saying it says 124, and that's the part. That-
Just like with the transportation, when you want to add a year, they want you to add multiple years. So they don't make adding a year cost effective because they want you to draw you in for a long period of time. So you say, well, if I'm going to pay 59 for 1 year, but I'm going to pay 250 for 7, let's go with the 250 because it doesn't really cost them anything else.
Is
It's a good ploy.
the History Museum also going up exponentially?
I would hope not.
I would hope not too. So then I just to wrap it up then, so page 88 then, why is that number different? For the Instructional services, social studies, supplies and materials.
wait, is there a line you're looking at there?
Well, there's no numbers.
See, is that what you're looking at?
So I'm looking at 60 instructional services, materials for social studies says 119,000.
So that's because, and we could fix this chart next year. It'll just look different. That's because I don't do a one-to-one from instructional materials to text materials. I go line item by line item and put them in categories on 177 and 178. So the department may have put something in PD that is more material-like. On your chart on 177 and 178, I switch it to where it belongs.
But when I check his chart, I line it up with the chart of accounts, so we're happy to provide you that crosswalk, so you can see where it sits in the budget.
The numbers matched.
The numbers match. It's not all in 309, it's 309, 401. It adds a few different, those are the sum objects together. It's not a one for one to the sum object. But I do have a crosswalk for that and I can provide that and we can provide additional detail.
It's not like I'm questioning that it's wrong, so I'm
Yeah.
debating if I want to see this at all, but I'm not crazy that this looks like odd.
So like, for example, we could do 2 columns, one on similar to how our account structure works, PD curriculum. text
Just to be clear, the chart on 177 and 178, that makes sense to me. I just don't understand why materials on that page aren't materials on this page.
And it just depends on which bucket we put them in, and sometimes they don't naturally fit in one versus the other. We split out curriculum development on the chart I make on 177 and 8. That generally goes under the PD account. Conferences generally go under the PD account. Like our art account, sometimes the materials don't naturally fit on their text materials. They put it on their curriculum development. And I switch it over in the chart. It's reporting on the line.
I just want it to match. I just want to understand it, so that's all.
I can give it to you.
You can make it match next year.
Yeah.
The budget book does need a little work.
Yeah, we've been talking about it in finance committee because the way that the budget book, actually, it's not even the budget book, the chart of accounts aligns. It's not the way that we look at it in the quarterly, and we could probably have a little bit more transparency with the way that we present it. We're gonna work on that in finance.
I'm nodding my head like I understand what you just said, but I would also only say, again, maybe it's just me, but then page 80 is really the one that was unclear. That represented increase only as opposed to this is what's being budgeted for that, because that's, again, it was a glaring difference, but now I understand. So, thank you.
Just on J4, this is a follow-up. So it says IXL additional licenses were added to align with the current district usage both in and out of school. Can you just speak to what increase that was and how large it was?
AXL. It was math, so I'm gonna have Dr. Jan investigate.
G4.
So we had used the program last year, and as we used it to support our students and their needs, there was a desire for some more licenses in order to span additional grades. And so that was increased. We utilized it last year. We have about 45-ish hundred licenses that are used across grades 3 through 8 for our students, and some of our students that are in Algebra 1 and grade 9 at the high school.
So it says usage in and outside of school. So we're encouraging the kids to use it. Are
We
we?
have access. We don't assign it necessarily as homework, but they do have access to the IXL platform through their ClassLink logon account. We primarily are using it. The percentage is about 75% to 25% when I looked yesterday.
Do we have
the breakdown?
Can we have like a full count of all those kind of, I know that we use them and obviously some are better than others, but I know they're kind of getting labeled as those like gamification, like any kind of software that use gaming, tokens, things like that. Do we have like kind of a count on how many of those we use throughout the district? It's a little bit different than curriculum. I don't know where those kind of live for you guys.
Yeah, so we have a few different applications that kind of draw that line of that have some type of curriculum piece that also might have a game, a specific count on the exact number of apps that, but it really depends on what your criteria is for a game too.
Okay. Maybe if we could just get a list of all the applications that are available to our students or that we're providing to them through ClassLink would be helpful.
Next, Kelly.
But to be clear, we know every single one because they have to fulfill the student data privacy. So we have an actual list.
We have a list.
These are the approved.
Exactly. That's why I was saying the clarification of whether it's
A gamification. Maybe we can just see a list of all those apps that are provided through ClassLink. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Jacobson.
So on the technology page, there is a link to the apps.
So that link is actually all of the applications that we reviewed for privacy and security and that we allow in the district, not necessarily that we're paying. So a lot of those applications are free. We're saying, hey, we've vetted them as a district, they're okay. As for the list that we're paying for, I could provide that.
Yeah, if we could see the list of everything we're paying for, that'd be great.
It should be understood that's important to understand that we may be using an app that is free in the district and it's adhered to our policies, whether we're paying for it or not.
So wouldn't it just be as easy as one more column on that page already and just saying pay or cost?
It's a good point. And some of the pieces do actually mark whether we have a license or not. But it's really was meant more for the privacy policy part of it. It's not really meant to
I
be.
just don't want you to recreate a wheel that already exists when all you have to do is add one more column there.
That's a good point. I might have a different way of approaching it, but that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Just following up on, you said that you were looking for additional grades, that you're doing 3 through 8 currently with the 9th graders who are in Algebra 1. What is the expansion?
Nope, that was the expansion last year, over the last year to set us up what we're using it this year. Last year, we started with about 2,000 licenses. So we increased our licenses. So what we have now is what we had throughout the year last year.
So sorry, this is actually on the, going into the next budget, there's a almost $23,000 increase in the line item. So that wouldn't make sense for this then.
That's
As an
our,
answer.
we paid it in the 3-year installment.
Yeah, the licensing's kind of convoluted. However, we actually applied additional licenses throughout this school year. From other funds were transferred into that account. So it's an increase from last budget, but it's not an increase from where we currently are in our license.
Just a follow up about IXL and the taco. Folks maybe not going home. Is there a way that parents may have access to the IXL program on their own personal laptops? Because just as a parent, I can tell you, my son had a lot of success with IXL. I'm not saying that works for every parent and not every parent wants technology in their house, but for me, I personally would sign up for it. Is there a way that we could possibly allow that access if books stop going home?
Yeah, actually, it could be accessed from any device.
Okay.
As long as it has a browser. You can go do it now. ClassLink, which will actually log them right in, or they can just log in through
So
any Windows, Mac.
any parent that has a question, like watching, should go how, not sure, to
Go right to our
Sure.
website.
the website.
Yeah, they can go right through student class link. Log right in.
Class link button and just choose IXL. And once they come up as a student, even knows which applications they're able to use. And essentially every application in that list of class link they can use in and out of school.
Dave, off you too soon, I'm sorry about that.
Sorry. So just going back to your response before, when we budget, it's year over year. And you're saying that it's not an increase from where we are, which just means it wasn't funded properly in the budget, what you're doing. So the increase does refer to budget over budget. So what I'm looking for in this answer is, what is the 22? That number broken down for the increases.
I have to look over the exact number of licenses that have increased, but we added through, well, actually, the exact things that it covered.
It looks like it's going towards Dorico Pro, ASB Classroom, Magic School, and Lexile, and IXL.
Well, so I did actually list the applications that we added and removed, and so the increase to instructional software, majority of the difference between last year is IXL is a big piece in that line, and I'm again, I can happy to give you that entire list of the applications.
What about the applications? I want like the 22,889 broken down.
So you want the difference, you wanna know how, when we got rid of an application, how much we saved, and then when we.
Yeah, I'm
purchased
looking for the dollars,
application, how
yes.
much it was To get to the 22.
Exactly.
Can I ask, is that, no disrespect, but is that like a time consuming thing? Because for $22,000, I just don't want staff spending an exorbitant amount of time.
No, I just have to find a way to portray the information. It would make the most sense. I mean, we could just do a left and right comparison. The reason I mention is though, is that the IXL is a good example, is I'm showing a left to right comparison. It may not, the names have changed in the applications. It's just kind of hard to compare them sometimes. I've tried to rename them to make the most sense, but it's kind of confusing going through the list.
Thank you.
Our questions in the J region. Supplies, tech, materials. Actually, L is next. Move on to section 3 on the agenda, capital, pages 105, 109 in the budget book, and questions labeled L in our spreadsheet. Sorry, Ms. Dooley.
I have a quick question on L1 going on Mrs. Jacobson's question. When it broke down, it says Chromebooks, 576, 450. But then it says laptop for staff and students. Students aren't included in those Chromebooks, or is this something different?
Students are included in those Chromebooks. I don't.
Yeah, so that actually is for non-Chromebook devices. The devices that might be purchased, secondary schools, we do have other laptops we're giving out, some tablet devices as well, mostly laptops. Those are just funds for the replacement cost for some of those laptop devices. And I included a group that was staff devices we're purchasing as well for replacement.
Yes, Jacobson. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lee.
I'm sorry. So wireless access points. Explain, is that in the office? Is that in the schools? Are these added hotspots in?
So those are across the district. Any of the access points, which we have almost 1,100 of them in the district, as they come end of life, as they break, to be honest, a basketball hits them in the gym. Just happened recently. They have to be replaced. They have to be cycled. So it's part of the process is that once they've hit end of life, they have to be cycled out. So that is budgeted amount to actually purchase additional ones, cycle in new devices.
And if you ask, we need them in the gym for SAT testing.
Yeah, those are the most expensive ones actually.
The interactive board, how many boards are those?
60 was what I put down for. I will say that we're still in negotiations with vendors over some better pricing and discussions on that end.
Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. One-to-one Chromebooks, 576, 450. Do you have a count on that? Like, I know you're working on the inventory and I assume that you do. I assume you do.
So we're talking about the specifically grade.
The 576, 450.
That's the number we're looking to reduce if we need to only include grade 6 and 9.
So what does this number currently cover by grade and count?
That'd be grades 6 and 9.
So the 576, 450 is only for 6 and 9.
Yeah, it's grade 6.
Okay.
So those are the two grades that it covers. Actually, the counts come out to a little under 1,500.
1,500?
Yeah, it's
That's okay.
15
Roughly 1,500 for
1,523 devices. So that's the estimate, which was a little bit of buffer from the actual enrollment count, grades 5 and 8. Yeah, because after they'll be shifting into.
Just so we're all clear, and just for the public's benefit, how do 3 through 5 get Chromebooks if we only refresh for 6 and 9? Because I know that's a new way that you're doing it, a distributive, things flow through and they carry through for the grades. So you get one in 6, stays with you a number of years, et cetera. So what's the trickle down into 3, 5?
So the grade 3 actually works similar idea. When you get the device, it becomes your device 3, 4, and 5. However, we generally have end-of-life devices similar to the access points, where as they become end-of-life, we have to recycle them. We have certain devices, for example, a lot of the grade 8s that are the people going into 9s, they've only had it for 3 years. That device has 2, 3 years easily of life back. We're able to trickle those back down to grade 3. We're giving the new devices that we're purchasing generally to grade 6 and 9. However, the discussion for grade 3 is that we're right now in kind of a limbo period where we have not a lot of devices that won't be end of life, that we now need to purchase more grade 3 devices to kind of replenish that surplus.
Okay, so perception wise is that we're buying Chromebooks for grade 3, but we're really not. They're coming from the middle schools down. We're buying Chromebooks in this budget for grade 6 and 9.
Yeah, I know that there's been some discussions about some additional cuts. The first perception of us to actually buy grade 3 as well, because of the fact that we were in need of actually cycling them in, but we are deciding to actually find another way to cut those down because of the fact that we're trying to make some additional cuts. So we're gonna have to so a good example is that we have models that are 2 years old going into grade 3 currently. So grade 3 students may have a device that's about 2 years old, while our current 6th and 9th graders have new devices. That's generally been the narrative. However, we don't have a lot of devices that are not end of life coming next year. So being able to give every single student the same device or same quality device is harder to do when you don't have enough replenished. So for example, we may end up buying a few that we give to grades 4 and 5 students because we're going to give those back to the 3rd graders.
Is that in this 576?
576 is only grades 6 and 9.
So to your question for the public, I think we have to stop using the term one-to-one devices for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. There will be a device that they will have access to when needed, but they will no longer have a district device where they're going to be bringing it home at will and using it at home or what have you.
I understand. That's a good operational question, though. 1-to-1, so Jane Doe in 3rd grade isn't going to get issued a Chromebook that stays at school. It's not, right?
Stays at school.
Stays at school. I'm asking a really specific question. Is Jane Doe being issued a school device? Or are you just gonna have a classroom?
Classroom with charging carts with
No,
devices.
and they have no, like the number on the back of the computer doesn't belong to a certain
They're
person.
not gonna be responsible unless they, like before, to take out insurance and all that stuff.
Right, because I'm just thinking about like if they go home and somebody doesn't come back, how, if you don't issue it to a person, how would you keep track of that?
Well, to be clear, we would pair them to the student.
Yeah.
So
because-
you are issuing to the students still?
Right, it happens, it's in the classroom, and I mean, to be honest, from a technical side, the other part is that having 10 different kids signing into these devices, it doesn't bode well for the device either. It's better to actually have that one device that the kid's grabbing. It's the same one they're grabbing.
So it is issued, it is still one-to-one, they're just not going home, that's the only difference.
Right, and it does, now, to be honest, this is one part of the budget, but the other part is actually the replacement and the repair. We have other accounts that we're accounting for how much we're putting into buying more screens and keyboards and things of that nature. By having the carts, grades 4 and 5 as well, that has already been decreased. So the cost of how much repair or replacement we're gonna be doing throughout the year.
It's about $7,000, you believe that it's about 7,000?
Yeah, it is, it's not a large, it's still something to keep in mind.
Yes, Ms. Flynn.
Just through the chair to Mr. Testani, if we were to move to I guess what used to be called like a computer lab model. So instead of having a one-to-one issue to each student, we would have maybe, I don't know, 3 full class sets available wherever they are kept. What kind of a reduction that look like?
Well, I don't think we'll see the reduction this year. We'll see it over time though. Because, but here's the other thing, there's still a classroom set. You still want because if you want to buy the rolling cart, those are not cheap. So either you're gonna spend them on the devices or you're gonna spend it on the cart that just gets rolled around. So if they're in the classroom, at least they can access it if necessary, but.
Computer on a cart, like art on a cart.
They were called cows. When I was working in schools, they were called cows. So.
I think we need to dispel this idea that kids are spending the majority of time in elementary school on devices. I mean, I've never, over 2 years now in the district, visiting schools unannounced because somebody said, well, they know you're coming, unannounced every time. I've never walked into a classroom and seen a child on a device.
I'll just say my concern kind of lays in the times that it's being offered that it would not have in the past. So that they have the option to use a Chromebook during indoor recess, that they have an option to use a Chromebook during snack, that they have an option to use a Chromebook when they're completed their other work and they want to do something else. That's really where my concern lays, because I can say.
Stop that. That's.
Well, I can say anecdotally as a parent, I don't let my child use my Chromebook, their Chromebook that's issued to them at our home. And I've checked usage times and I'm curious where that usage time is happening. So that's just an anecdotal for my household, and every household is different. Every parent is different, but I think we are hearing some pretty desperate pleas to get a handle on how much time it's being used, how it's being used. And that seems really anecdotally different to your point across the district. So as we wait for a technology policy, this is kind of the only opportunity we have to discuss it. So I think it's.
And again, that can be done immediately. I mean, if we don't need a policy to do that, we can issue that directive. I've already issued that directive in terms of library and media, that children shouldn't be going down to the library media center every time they have library media with their Chromebook.
I appreciate that.
So that's already been issued. I think it was the principals, they've already shared it. I think we have to be cognizant of that, some people receive things a little differently. I think people feel a little picked on right now,
No,
but we can definitely issue that indoor recess, and those times should not be used for Chrome.
And I really want to disclose too, I think that term genie in the bottle is very indicative of the times we're in. I had kindergartners and 3rd graders during the COVID pandemic. These were issued. I don't think it's a bad thing to look at our practices. I don't think it's anything that anyone should feel badly about, guilty about. That every family is different, every classroom is different, but having these conversations is really important and it shouldn't be done with shame.
And I will say again, I will issue the mandate that they shouldn't buy a smartphone for their child until the child is 16 years old.
Please do.
If you want to get in touch with your child, flip phones are just as good.
Dime in the shoe, a dime in the shoe.
Thank you.
Well, there's no pay phones anywhere anymore, and they were a quarter now, dude.
Fair enough.
We're dating ourselves here.
Yes, I was.
While we're on this subject, Chair to Mr. Testani, is there a way that families that do need access for their homework to something, possibly fill out a waiver or some kind of request for some?
So if there's homework being issued that needs to be done on a device, obviously they can take the device. But if it's an issue where they want the Chromebook at home for usage, no. We are,
For home.
yeah. But then the teacher would know that they need the device for homework. I think what's been happening is that, and in some schools, they're very happy with the device going home. They've seen improvements in math for IXL and things like that, as you were mentioning. But trying to be cognizant of what parents want, but at the same time, this is a collective effort, not just pick on the schools.
I just say that because I want to make sure people have access to it. We can assume.
No, but again, just a quick follow-up on that is that I do agree with, through the chair, Mr. Testani, your point that it's not because they want to have a computer at home.
Correct.
We're not in the business of whatever your financial means are, that's a line that we draw for the district. But
Correct.
I just want to clarify one last time, Mr. Taddy, that, because your answer to Mrs. Jacobson on L1 was very clear and then said very clearly, grades 6 and 9, where is the elementary school component of this represented in the numbers? And it's not that I'm challenging any part of it. I just want to know, where is that number? Because you just said very clearly that the 576, 450 was grades 6 and 9. And then I have a feeling there's a long story, and I don't want the long story of what's actually going on with 3, 4, 5. If this isn't a good replenish year, shifting down, I get that. But where is the elementary school number?
It's in there. It's part of that.
Okay, so it's not grade 6 and 9. It's elementary school 6 and 9? 3, 6 and 9?
That's fair. I like that. I like the elementary 6, 9 explanation. That makes more sense.
Okay, thank you.
We'll tease out exactly, because that was where proposed reduction would go as well as from the elementary school.
That's why I didn't want to get into it more,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to clarify that it was in that number.
Yes. We've already reduced it a little bit, so.
I have to ask about K11.
But what?
K11. We've been waiting for 4 years for the town to give us a solar.
That's K.
Skipped K.
We're not,
Oh,
you're not wrong.
Your role, sister.
For another week.
They
for
should.
next week, town hall. That's it.
Why we don't go.
Speak your truth.
It's
Again, right, it's just right there.
Fairfield.
Okay.
All right, any more questions in section L? Oh, who's next? Go.
Yeah, so Mr. Peterson, thank you for L6. Just so that I'm clear, what is currently serving the purpose of L6?
It's kind of a hybrid setup. It's
What courses is it serving? And then how are we currently serving them that we're now putting in this?
I actually have to refer to Robert Hughes about this, what specific course is being taught there, the initiative that he pushed, that they're switching over to this basically industry standard. But I couldn't speak to what they're actually teaching currently.
Can you remind me what the cost is? Again, it wasn't my question, so I don't have a note of that, but, and maybe it was on a previous answer.
So each school, because I split up each school's $12,600. The entire setup for the teacher and the student setup comes out to the 15,200.
25,000?
Yes.
So All right, well, I'll submit that as a follow-up question in terms of how is this need being met currently?
Yeah, I could say that the software being ran and the machines they're on an old operating system. It's standalone systems with keyboards, so.
So this isn't something new. This is a replacement.
Yes.
Oh, all right, that's the part I wasn't clear on.
To replace it with something much more conducive to today's technology and the music world.
I just meant this isn't an enhancement. This isn't something new. It's just a replacement. Oh, no, I get it. Okay, thank you.
Replacing it with something more fresh.
Blake?
So they're replacing with Final Cut Pro, correct? And what I'm looking at in your.
So the Pro app bundle comes with, they're primarily gonna be using Logic. It happens that it comes with Final Cut Pro, so it's just part of the bundle.
So are they allowed to, because it's on the Mac, we letting them expand the licensing so they can go home and use it too, or they can only use?
No, it is only on the device, currently. It's not gonna be at home use.
Jacobs?
Belfry. Thank you very much for the answer to this question. I'm quite concerned on this. And I don't know if this will come forward at some point when we talk about adjustments, Mr. Testani. I want to make sure that Walter Fitzgerald students have any equipment that they need in order to access courses that they are interested into, as we know that some of our courses do require more advanced technology. It seems that in its answer that's taken care of, but that the library piece remains an open question, shall we say. So I would be interested in hearing a proposal from principal or just you or whatever it may be. What can we do there?
Sure.
Because they don't have library media, and I'd like to see something from books or whatever it may be, and I know it might be operationally difficult because at the high schools, you can check them out and there's a library media
You
specialist.
can do it through the English classes, through the English courses or other courses.
I'd like to just hear what a proposal might be, and might be something that I'm interested in adding. So look for that from you in the future.
Yeah, I would probably ask the principal to reach out, and I can get the conversation started with, what's his name from Fairfield, Scott?
Travis, yeah.
See, maybe he can go up there, we can do a walkthrough, what his recommendations would be on how we would get something set up initially in the building. I don't have an expertise, and I would rely on him for his recommendations on what would be most appropriate to get started.
Thank you.
Any more questions on this section? All right, seeing none. Move on to item 3H on the agenda, contract services, pages 56 to 61 in the budget book. These are questions in F, category F. Going back to page 10 on the big spreadsheet handed. Mr. Krasno.
My question at 15 pertains to our legal fees, as I understand the answer. So it's 2.5%. Any luck looking at possibly bringing it back in-house? For the costs.
We can try again. Yeah, we can try again. I have no problem. We have the posting, we could put it out again tomorrow, see where we go.
I'm just thinking, even if we spend a little more on that position, if we have to, we're now at over $500,000, or if the legal fees, it starts getting high. So if any way we can cut that a little bit, we're trying to find something. So
Listen,
looking everywhere I possibly can.
we'll get it.
I don't know, what's the ask?
In-house legal
The
counsel.
legal fees went up another 2.5%, so it's now over $500,000. And I remember we were looking for an in-house counsel. Obviously, it's difficult to find. Obviously, probably the amount of money we were paying for it, which I remember was a lot less than $500,000. Maybe there's some happy medium where we can save 100, 200,000. Again, we're all looking for cost savings here, so just trying to find.
I hear you and I appreciate the ideas of cost saving, but we did have an in-house counsel. Yet our legal fees were still high because the in-house counsel was still regularly consulting with outside counsel. So if we look back at history of where we were, I think we need to take a close look at that. And I'm not saying that the person wasn't capable of doing the job. It just happens to be that there's so many specialties in so many different areas that I think it would be hard for one person in-house to be able to handle the complexity of labor, special ed, everything. So I think ultimately I would caution that we would probably potentially spend more.
I completely get that. My concern's more, we really don't have any of the large contracts coming up next year. So to increase what we spent this year, another 2.5% without all the contract negotiation stuff, I'm trying to figure out ways.
I think what might be helpful is to delineate where the big percentages of the legal fees, because I don't think it's in the contracts.
Oh, you're right.
It's not in collective bargaining.
Oh, you're right.
So
We would have to get
it's,
an in-house lawyer that specializes in special education.
yes, that's where the expense.
But that's what I'm kind of getting at. There might be ways to trim the costs.
Is that what the posting was for, that we tried and didn't get anybody, or was that a general counsel?
It was more general. We were looking for someone that has done this in other school districts. And we had a candidate, but the demands in terms of work from home and all these things were just ridiculous. That wasn't gonna fly. We needed somebody here at least a few days a week. And that sounded to me, unfortunately, that it looked like someone that was trying to serve two school districts simultaneously. Just by the prodding of the questions and the way she wanted to set up the schedule. She was gonna be an independent contractor, maybe somewhere else.
Let's work if you can get it.
Well, yeah,
Good.
it's tough. But I mean, again, we could put it out there. Someone who specializes in special education law, state of Connecticut. We get some bites, great. I think it's gonna be difficult.
So Jacobson.
This is in a series of questions. I'm gonna jump to F3, if that's okay. Just trying to, F3. Put together several pieces. The answer on the sheet, this sheet that we got with the broken down, is one of our handouts for the interns. Description, and then the budget amount. So let's just jump to 57, where it says an additional investment of 107,250 supports 8 residents and 4 students earned. However, this page doesn't align with the numbers. So if we're expanding it, but we already have more than, so I'm confused.
So overall, the residency program, so we had 23 interns and 10 residents. Oh, I'm sorry.
What's in our budget book and part-time staff is 23 interns and 1 resident.
Right. In the budget book, but what we currently have in this year is 14 interns and 10 residents. And what we're proposing is eight residents and 14 interns for next year. So when you look at the total budget for all the interns, which were in the part-time budget, which are being shifted to contract services because they're actually paid through a contract, they're not paid through external services. The net difference between those two is 107K, 56 of which is due to just the funding of the intern and resident program. So if you take the cost per intern, multiply it by the number of interns, the cost per resident, multiply it by the number of residents. Plus there's a stipend for teachers, and plus there's a cost for, there's a minor cost for substitute differential for when they serve as subs in our buildings. Overall, that's $107,000 increase year over year to the budget to go from 23 interns to 14 interns and 8 residents. In addition, we're counting on savings in a separate line of $120,000. That $120,000 is assuming that 8 of the 10 interns that we have now would come back and work with us next year at a savings of $15K per resident. The reason it's $15K, if you remember, our admission document has $35,000 assumed for every person that comes back to, for every retiree when we backfill that retiree. Historically, that savings is 35,000. What we noticed last year, because teacher shortage, because of our better contract rates, we were only getting $15,000 per rehire on those savings. So this is the net difference. If we were to hire these residents in at the lower rate, getting value for the residents. So there's 3 pieces to it. The first piece is budget this year. The second piece is the proposed budget next year. And the third piece is the savings.
One question that I think Ms. Maxim Kennelly asked, those residents that say elementary, those should read, they're cross-endorsed with special education as well. So they are all, except for, and social studies jumps on and off, and English has been jumping on and off. They're all in shortage.
Earlier it was described that the residents have to agree if we want them to a 3-year term with us. That doesn't apply to the interns though.
Correct.
Okay, and I'm just confirming that interns and residents can still come from other places, not including. So on this sheet again, we have the same contracts for Fairfield U and University of Bridgeport as we do for Sacred Heart.
For interns.
For interns, yes.
The new contract is the contract for the residents, and that contract is with Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart has 2 options for students. They have a resident program and they have an intern program. The residents, people won't choose a residency at Sacred Heart if they plan on going back home when they're done to teach in Massachusetts, for example. The other colleges and universities, we take interns from all of them, whether it be UConn, Southern, there's just not enough out there.
The only difference between the resident and the intern is that one's full year and one is semester.
The resident year is much more intense than an intern. Interns come for the semester, they bounce around, they sub here, they sub there. The resident is solely in one classroom all year long with that teacher. And at a certain point, they take over the classroom. And so when they come back, when we offer them a position, they're in essentially a 2nd-year teacher when they walk through the door.
The New York Fellows Program,
Can't hear you.
like the New York City Fellows Program, familiar?
So I'm gonna talk more about it during staffing, but for the Board of Ed approved budget book, what I'm struggling with is in all these questions is because we're losing by school information by moving it to this one big bucket. That always bothers me because I can't track then over time what's happening, right? With the money or the positions. So is it possible then, based on what you're planning to do, to have this resident intern line, if this is what the board adopts and approves, to actually have it broken down by building?
Yes, we just can't put it back in the personnel account because it didn't belong there, but yes, it's certainly absolutely possible to break it down by building.
Okay, I just,
Building code in the contracts, absolutely.
that just makes tracking things. Okay, thank you. Have on that.
Wait,
Let's answer.
Ms. Maxim Kennelly.
Yeah, so following up on the same topic, and I did not have the time to dig the research into this, but when we first started with any idea of a resident, it was brought forward to us that we would get 2, and we cut the budget to end up with only 1 because the board was offered no assurance that the person would come to us. When did it come to these numbers?
We shifted over and created the partnership with Sacred Heart. This is not through CREC. The CREC in resident program was much different than what Sacred Heart has developed. Much more expensive as well.
CREC was more expensive.
A lot more expensive.
Does Fair,
About 70 grand a resident,
right,
because they give them a living wage.
do that for?
No,
But for Fairfield U and UB,
just-
do they have resident programs? And what does the resident program get? I mean, initially, the point of the resident program was to increase the diversity of our pool, of our hiring pool. Is that any factor in this whatsoever now?
No. And the reason why, I mean, it's a hope.
I mean, obviously, we're always trying.
It's just-
I don't question that, but
It's just the number of students that enroll in teacher prep programs. We are beholden to that. And then on top of that, as you know, Fairfield U and Sacred Heart pull from all over the region. So it also has to be, that's why we want some assurance that if we hire them, that they stay with us for a certain period of time and they don't jet to somewhere else,
But we discussed before that we don't actually have any mechanism for getting that money back.
Sacred Heart does. So they are our conduit for that. So
And
they
how do they do that?
pay us back, correct?
Our contract is with Sacred Heart. now.
Right, it's not, right. So we don't have to sign a promissory note with the resident. Sacred Heart deals with all that in the back.
Follow up on that. Sorry, can
Go
I?
ahead.
They'll pay us back, but we're not gonna supplant with somebody who wasn't our resident and be like, well, we're not gonna pay you back, but we're gonna give you this different person that wasn't one of your residents. Is that in the contract?
No.
Is it in the contract?
What do you mean by supplant?
Well, Ms. Laborious just said that Sacred Heart will pay us back. It's tied to the position, not the individual.
They pay us back a portion. They pay us back what we paid the resident, the 10,000. We got the year's worth of intern from them. We don't get that back. We don't get the whole boat.
Because they were essentially an employee. They were fulfilling.
They fulfilled it.
They were teaching.
They fulfilled their year with us, so we're not gonna, and they took their courses and we covered that component, so. If there was an intern, for example, that left 3 weeks in, they would replace the intern, right? They wouldn't give us any back. Any of the schools would. But in this case, they recoup the $10,000 for us.
Oh, wait, I just got one more question.
That was a follow-up to that.
Go ahead.
Were you kind of getting at like after 2 years if they left?
Right.
Instead of
Planting up the
holding their
individual that
fate?
wasn't a part of our
Oh,
residence.
if they,
We don't, we
Yes.
actually choose the residents. We interview them. Principals at the schools interviewed them and gave a thumbs up, thumbs down. So for example, we interviewed much more than these. We didn't want the others. We actually only wanted 8, but another biology came up. We interviewed and we took it because it's a shortage area. And then the secondary English, the woman went back to school and is the drama leader at Fairfield Ludlow High School. So we thought it was a great opportunity that she can then be an employee once she's finished and doesn't leave for another district, and we lose the drama person.
So thank you for the clarifications. Is this an annual contract?
It's year to year,
It is year to year.
yes.
Good. All right, thank
There
you.
may be some changes based on the grant, the TQP grant they had. So if they can't provide us with the candidates we want, then we would just revert to a traditional internship program. So
I just ask questions about other schools too, just because other schools have different certification areas, was my issue, is that Sacred Heart does all, and there's no university that offers all the certifications, so want to make sure that we're keeping it open for other schools to come in from certification areas that Sacred Heart does not in fact offer.
Nika does a great job reaching out to every college and university in the area. The issue is no candidates to serve all the districts.
Understood. Less, not enough, short, and hence the shortage, so.
That's the shortage, correct?
One more question. Sorry that I can't remember this. In past budget books, when we talked about retirements, how did we indicate an expectation of, that whole algorithm that was calculated by central office staff? We're counting on, we believe we will have 16 retirements. How was the money for that reflected in the budget book?
So, yeah, we'll do that on the salaries next week. That's in
No,
the,
I don't want the details of it. Just how did we do it in past budget books?
so in the wage, not the wage and benefit, that's called the staff replacement line, is the attrition account. So within the staff replacement line, we have an assumption about the retiree savings. And in the past, we utilized a 10-year look back algorithm that we would apply to the age of the people in the current time. Now, this year, when we get to it, we did it two different ways. We used the algorithm and we also knew the people that are going to retire because the teacher contract has them telling us before the October date.
Yeah.
So the algorithm was actually close to that number. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but the savings that we were assuming is lower as the more recent savings on a per hire basis is lower now.
In general, because we're hiring, and I'm gonna say it, well, more experienced, more qualified teachers. And that's not, we always wanted to make the point of saying that's not a bad thing.
That's correct.
It's good, but and I wrote this, I used the word as a ghost figure. I think it's a little bit deceptive to refer to this program as $120,000 savings. I support the idea of investing in in what will be our own staff, getting their buy-in, getting to try them out. It's what they provide the district is valuable, but I'd have to look back again at exactly how it was done, but it's not real to say that this is $120,000 savings. So I think that's a little not intentional. I'm not applying malice, but it feels deceptive in the book to say that.
We just took the difference between what we hired back against the retirees for the current year. And then what we believe we'd be hiring this cohort in, for next year. And that's the difference. It's not the full 35,000. It's only 15 per. But yes, your point is well taken. I agree.
Thank you.
Any other questions in contracted services? Oh, Mrs. Jacobs.
F6, just really quickly, it describes a revised recruitment strategy. Understood that you're taking down the billboards, but can we just get a little more color on what the revised recruitment strategy entails? F6.
Evening, Kate Ingram, Executive Director of Human Resources. Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure. F6, your answer was that I asked about, there's a proposed 10.64 reduction in recruitment. Your answer was that you're doing a revised recruitment strategy. You're taking down the billboards or something, but I'm looking for more color on what the revised recruitment strategy is.
I can definitely get you more information, but we're definitely doing more of reaching out to different colleges and universities outside of just Connecticut. Someone just talked about diversifying our certified teaching population. So we're looking to partner with different universities that have a more diverse population. But to me, physically and my staff going there and doing college fairs and webinars and things of that nature to have people learn more about fair food.
Okay, so just, I don't know,
So
where we would just get more.
So that reduction is more so talking specifically to the billboard, right? Because we increased the actual budget last year because we were doing a lot of marketing with the billboards and the radio. And while they work, we just want to kind of pivot a little to do more in-person marketing.
Okay, so net reduction in recruitment, and I'm only bringing that up because I don't want to cut from recruitment, right? I mean, to be honest with you. So I don't know if this is an item for the 28th meeting, if we're getting that presentation, but I just would like to understand
I can give you a listing of
what we're doing.
that problem.
Okay, all right, thank you.
More for this section. Contracted services. Once, twice. Sold. I will caution everybody that I think our 21st meeting on the next Tuesday, 21st, likely be longer. It has some larger issues like the personnel and benefits and the contentious dues fee section. I believe we will also be getting the Q1 financial presentation on Tuesday. Q2, sorry.
And another, what was the other?
Talk a little bit about the elementary schedule.
Right.
Budget's more, is there?
So out of curiosity, will there be, this was something that became a hot button topic a few years back. I don't know if anybody would tune in, but will we be adding public comment to that agenda? Or I put out there for consideration of leadership on that topic.
I consider, we're currently not planning to take any votes on the 21st.
Got it.
I will keep that in mind.
Just want to be mindful that the elementary schedule discussion started way before the budget, so it's not a result of budget, so to speak. Just happens to coincide and reap some benefit from the budget possible.
Ms. Jacobson.
I'll echo the request for next week, just because as we do our deliberations for the 20, it would be nice to give it. And I did go back and, the first night we didn't have it last year, but the second night we did. So just to be consistent, it might be helpful to hear from people before we have to think about the 28th. So I would echo that ask.
And just as a reminder that it's general past practice that people come prepared on next Tuesday with possible things that they're going to be bringing up. Because numbers have to be calculated. It's a notice to our fellow board members, so.
So we have a question. Monday's a holiday. So, yeah, so we can open up tonight or tomorrow morning early the document for questions. It leaves you a tight time. You don't have the weekend, because unless you want it on Monday mid-morning, Tuesday mid-morning, we're gonna have to spend time on Friday answering questions.
I will not be done before the weekend. I could tell you that now, and I apologize. And if it means I have to deal with answers that get to me later, I'm totally open to that because that's my schedule. So
Okay.
I fully accept that mine have to be blank at that point.
Follow-up. That's to insert our follow-up questions on tonight, right? We'll start on the 21st. It's gonna be long. So it's not open right now to insert our follow-ups from tonight and then the other sections.
You get home, you could start with the follow-ups and start with the other ones. Yeah, we can, it's live, but
Oh, okay.
we're gonna have to shut it down Thursday midnight. I don't know, 11, whatever.
And then open it again when?
And then open it again for one person on Friday night.
Hey, but Marco and I were both on there on Sunday night. He was waiting for me to jump
We can
off.
open it up before, at the end of
Party in
the end of the business day on Friday, so that you can
Okay.
start going.
So everyone just get on it.
Get on it.
Okay.
Why would there be any follow-up questions, Mrs. Jacobson? Everything was answered appropriately.
At this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Reyes is seconded by Mr. Lee. All in favor? Who's unanimous?
Thank you, everyone. Good staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know.